Last night's Stephen Colbert show exploded into chaos when a fiery clash between Colbert and White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt spiraled into a full-blown verbal war, complete with accusations, personal jabs, and one explosive takedown that left the studio gasping. It started like any other late-night interview. The lights dimmed, the theme music roared, and Stephen Colbert strode onto the stage, beaming with his trademark smugness as he addressed the cheering crowd. On the surface, it was a typical Tuesday night on network television. But what unfolded next was anything but ordinary. Colbert wasted no time with pleasantries. After a brisk introduction of Karoline Leavitt, hailed as the youngest White House press secretary in American history, Colbert's tone shifted from light-hearted to sharply confrontational. Smiling thinly, he lobbed his opening shot with the kind of sarcastic grin that's made him a late-night darling for years. "So, Karoline," Colbert said, tapping his cards, "tell me, how does it feel to be the mouthpiece for a man who can't string a sentence together unless it's on a golf course?" The audience chuckled uncomfortably, unsure whether it was humor or hostility. Levitt, seated across from him, did not smile. Her posture was upright, composed, and her expression sharpened. "Well, Stephen," she replied coolly, "it feels a lot like sitting across from someone who pretends to be a comedian while pushing the DNC's script." Gasps rippled through the audience. Colbert blinked, briefly stunned. The crowd, clearly expecting a soft, late-night chat, was now witnessing the birth of a battle. Colbert leaned forward, his voice tightening. "Let's not pretend you aren't just another extension of Trump's ego," he snapped. "You're not a trailblazer, Karoline. You're a puppet, and Trump's hand is still very much up your back." Laughter broke out from some corners of the crowd, but this time it felt cruel, partisan, and charged. The show's atmosphere had curdled into something tense, the way a thunderstorm settles over a calm afternoon. Levitt didn't flinch. She met Colbert's stare, letting a pause hang heavy between them. "You think you're untouchable because you hide behind applause and punchlines," she said. "But I'm here because I've worked for everything I have. I didn't inherit a legacy in television. I built my career from scratch, while your show has become nothing more than a political cash machine disguised as satire." The audience murmured. The temperature in the room was shifting. Colbert laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really want to come at me on integrity?" he snapped. "You who stand at that podium every day spinning delusion into policy? Don't talk to me about truth." Leavitt tilted her head, smiling slightly now. "If we're going to talk about truth, Stephen," she said, her voice crisp, "maybe we should talk about the corporate donors you never disclose when you rant about climate change, or how your production team filters out conservative audience members to keep your echo chamber intact." Now it was Colbert who flinched. The crowd stilled. For a second the cameras caught Colbert's face, his confident smirk faltering. "I'm not the puppet here," Levitt continued, her tone intensifying. "You are. You're a puppet of media, conglomerates, of political operatives. You've turned a comedy show into a weapon of influence. You sell ideology, not laughs, and you do it for ratings, not justice." Colbert rose slightly in his seat, his hand gripping the edge of the desk. His voice came back louder, harder. "You're out of line." "No, Stephen," Levitt replied. "I'm just no longer playing by your rules." The crowd was fully engaged now, some booing, others cheering. The division was palpable. Every word between the two now felt like a hammer strike. The charm of Colbert's usual verbal fencing had vanished, replaced with sheer aggression. The man known for clever takedowns and crowd-pleasing zingers was now visibly rattled, grappling with a guest who wasn't shrinking under pressure, but rising in it. Colbert leaned in again, his voice low and venomous. "You don't get to come on my show and lecture me about influence. Not when you work for a man who tried to overturn an election," Levitt fired back. "And you don't get to parade around as America's conscience when you've been quietly cutting deals behind the scenes with streaming platforms that fund political candidates. You're not above this. You are this. The camera cut between the two as if watching a heavyweight bout. Colbert's expression turned hard. He snapped his fingers toward the crew. We're taking a... But Levitt cut through him. No, let's finish this. The American people deserve to see how you really operate. The audience roared. The energy had reached its apex, and Stephen Colbert, America's late-night provocateur, suddenly found himself cornered. He hadn't expected her to fight back like this, not with this level of confidence, not with such precision. There was no stammer in her voice, no hesitation. In her delivery, Karoline Leavitt wasn't here to play defense. She was here to expose. Colbert, still seated behind his desk, glanced off camera for a beat, subtle but telling. Whether looking to a producer or just buying a moment to collect himself, it didn't go unnoticed. Levitt clocked it instantly. "What's the matter, Stephen?" she said, her tone sharp, surgically calm. "Need a lifeline? Or are you just realizing this isn't going to be one of your usual monologues where nobody gets to answer back?" Colbert's smile twitched at the corners. "Performative. Brittle. You've clearly memorized your talking points. Congratulations. But don't confuse attention with validation. Just because people are clapping doesn't mean they agree with you. They might just be stunned you said it out loud." Levitt didn't blink. "You mean like when you do 12-minute rants about the evils of capitalism, then cut to a commercial sponsored by Pfizer and Amazon?" That landed. The audience gave a sharp, involuntary, "ooh," the kind that fills the air. When someone crosses a line they're not supposed to, but maybe needed to. Colbert straightened in his chair, posture tightening. "You're throwing accusations like darts hoping one sticks. It's juvenile. Is it?" Levitt leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees, eyes locked on his. "Or is it inconvenient? You pretend you're here to inform the public, to challenge power. But you are power. You built your platform on satire, and somewhere along the way, you stopped making jokes and started making policy. You chose to become a gatekeeper." Colbert's voice dropped an octave. "And you chose to become a mouthpiece for authoritarianism. And you chose to become the millionaire face of resistance, while cozying up to the very corporations and lobbying groups you once mocked." He shifted uncomfortably. The crowd had gone quiet again, waiting, unsure whether they were watching a political debate or a professional implosion. Colbert tried to pivot, the muscle memory of hosting still trying to surface. "You know, there's a reason this show invites voices from all political backgrounds. I believe in discourse." Levitt tilted her head. "You believe in controlling discourse. That's why you selectively book conservatives you know you can ridicule. You invite people you think will fold under pressure. Tonight you miscalculated." There was a brief pause. For a second even the camera crew seemed frozen. Colbert was visibly flushed now, eyes darting as he searched for higher ground. "I don't take lectures on integrity from someone working for a man under federal indictment," he said finally. Levitt didn't back down. "Then maybe take one from your own conscience. Let's talk about the memos, Stephen." He paused. "What memos?" "The internal communications," she said, voice low, steady. "From your writing staff to CBS's executive board. The ones where your team pitched segment angles explicitly designed to boost certain candidates, right before ad buys from their PACs came through." A ripple shot through the audience. Colbert's expression flattened. "That's not public information," he said carefully. "No," she answered. "It's not. But it should be. And it will be." There it was. A pause. A long one. The air in the room shifted from combative to electric. Levitt hadn't just challenged his authority. She'd pierced the myth. Colbert, regaining some of his poise, forced a laugh, tight, hollow. "So what are you now, an investigative journalist?" "No," she said. I'm someone who's tired of elites pretending they're rebels. You act like you're standing up to tyranny, but your audience is a mix of upper-middle-class liberals, Silicon Valley execs, and Hollywood donors. You're not speaking truth to power. You're dinner theater for the status quo. The crowd was divided now, some clapping, others dead silent, and a handful visibly uncomfortable, as if watching their favorite teacher get called out in front of the entire school. Colbert cut in sharply. You think this job is easy? Sitting here every night trying to keep the country sane while your party drags it through chaos? You think I like turning jokes into arguments? Leavitt raised her voice, the only time she did during the entire confrontation. No, I think you like pretending you're the antidote to a problem you help create. That silenced him. Even the band, usually quick to riff a joke into a musical break, didn't dare touch it. Colbert gripped the edge of his desk again, this time not to lean in, but to ground himself. You know what? If you came here thinking this would be your moment, congratulations. You've made your point. I hope the clicks were worth it. I didn't come here for clicks, Levitt said. I came here because your show still pretends to matter. I came here to tell your audience that they deserve better than a man who sells outrage with a smirk and thinks it's resistance. The camera caught the flicker of something rare on Colbert's face. Hesitation. Not defeat, but vulnerability, raw and exposed. I don't need to win a debate to prove my worth, Levitt continued. I've walked into rooms filled with people twice my age and still made my case. But this is a stage, not a discussion. And you've been using it to shape the minds of millions under the illusion of comedy. That's the real punchline. Before Colbert could respond, Levitt stood. Colbert raised a hand. Sit down. We're not done. But she was already unhooking her mic. Oh, we're done, she said. The American people heard enough. The audience erupted into chaos. Cheers, jeers, whistles, stunned applause. As the camera tried to keep up, Levitt walked off set without looking back. Colbert remained seated, staring after her, his fingers curled tight around the edge of the desk. And just like that, what was supposed to be a controlled late night sparring match had turned into a scorched earth moment of political theater, and one of the most controversial interviews in the show's history. Karoline Leavitt was gone. Her heels had clacked defiantly across the floor as she disappeared. Behind the heavy black curtain, still mic'd up, the feed faintly crackling into the control room for several seconds after her exit. But the confrontation she had ignited hadn't left with her. It lingered, thick in the air, crawling into the silence that followed. Stephen Colbert hadn't moved. He sat statue still behind his desk, one hand flat on the surface, the other gripping his cue cards with white-knuckled intensity. His eyes hadn't drifted from the curtain since Levitt vanished through it, but his expression had changed. The usual sharp wit, the sardonic twist to his mouth, gone. In its place was a look few had ever seen on him during a taping. Quiet calculation. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, laugh, or just wait for someone to tell them what to do. A handful clapped, awkward and out of sync. Others shifted, in their seats, eyes darting between the stage and the offstage corridors. Even the band was still frozen, instruments limp in their hands, unsure whether to break the tension or respect its gravity. Finally, Stephen looked up. He placed his cards down deliberately, leaned into the mic, and forced a smile. Well, that was a thing. Uneasy laughter, more relief than amusement, rippled through the audience. But the control room wasn't laughing. Upstairs, executive producer Rob Jensen leaned into his headset, his voice hushed but tense. Cut her mic, completely. Do we still have her on Channel 3? No, she's clear, someone replied. She ditched the pack by the green room. Audio's dead. Good, Rob said. Now kill any replay from the last 8 minutes. We'll edit around it before syndication. Back on stage, Colbert attempted to salvage the moment. You know, It's not every day we get to host the White House press secretary, especially one who comes in swinging like she's auditioning for a Fox News primetime slot. That got a few polite chuckles, but the fire was gone from the crowd. Then, suddenly, a voice boomed in his earpiece. "Stephen, we've got a problem," he frowned. "Define problem." "We've got two hashtags trending nationally in the last 5 minutes. Levitt vs. Colbert and Expose Colbert." The second one made him shift uncomfortably in his seat. "And there's more," the voice continued. "Clips are already circulating. The one where she says you manipulate your segments for PAC money? It's already at 2 million views on X." He swallowed. Colbert was a man built for optics. He could sense it in the air. This wasn't just a controversial segment. This was a rupture. Something had broken open. And the worst part? It wasn't over. Backstage, Karoline Leavitt sat calmly on a metal folding chair in the hallway, her jacket draped over her arm, her assistant furiously thumbing through her phone. "It's blowing up," the assistant whispered. "Ben Shapiro's already quote-tweeting you, and Tucker Carlson just called the interview the most important moment of this political cycle." Levitt, unfazed, looked straight ahead. "Good. Keep monitoring. I want to know when the network starts spinning it." Moments later, the producer came storming through the corridor. "Karoline, we're going to need to ask you to leave the premises." "I'm already leaving," she replied evenly, "but I'll be doing it with a statement, so you might want to stay tuned." Back. In the studio, Colbert took a sip of water. The next guest, a comedian from some upcoming Netflix show, stood awkwardly in the wings, unsure whether they were still going on. Colbert waved a dismissive hand and turned back to the audience. "Well, folks," he said, voice slightly hoarse, "sometimes the truth gets a little messy. But that's what this desk is for." But even as he said it, he could feel the cracks widening. Because it wasn't just that Levitt had landed punches. It was that she had forced him into a corner he hadn't anticipated. A space he rarely found himself in. Defensiveness. Within the hour, social media was flooded with edited clips, slow-motion reactions, hot takes, dueling hashtags. The battle had left the studio and entered the bloodstream of online discourse. On a live stream, conservative commentator Clay Houghton addressed his audience. "What you saw tonight wasn't just a press secretary owning a talk show host. It was the moment the left's favorite satirist got exposed for being exactly what he pretends to fight against. A polished mouthpiece for the elite." MSNBC, on the other hand, opened their segment with a sharply different take. Leavitt's performance was dangerous and manipulative. It's disturbing to see how easily misinformation can be dressed in confidence and sold to a primetime audience. But no one could ignore what had happened. And in a now viral screen recording from a backstage camera, leaked from someone inside the production team, Leavitt could be seen turning to a crew member just before exiting the building. "They brought me here thinking I'd flinch, but I've spent the last 3 years being screamed at by a press pool who thought I didn't belong. This," she motioned toward the stage, "this was just another Tuesday." That clip alone hit 5 million views within the first 3 hours. The quote had already been printed on unofficial T-shirts. By midnight, Levitt's follower count had doubled. At 1:30 in the morning, Colbert's team released a vague statement citing creative differences and a lively, passionate debate that demonstrates the spirit of open conversation. But insiders were already whispering. He was furious, not just at Levitt, but at his own producers, who had underestimated her. The following day, CNN and Fox News opened their primetime shows with back-to-back coverage of the incident. 2 narratives, 1 moment, 2 very different stories. And, just when it seemed like the fire might start cooling, CBS issued a sudden takedown request for the unedited segment. All unauthorized clips of the interview began disappearing from YouTube. Commentators saw it as damage control. The internet saw it as proof. The Colbert machine was running scared, but Karoline Leavitt was not done. By 8 a.m. the following morning, the fallout had morphed from an internet spectacle into a media-wide inferno. Major outlets were scrambling. Producers were fielding calls from political strategists. Editorial boards were rushing out reaction columns. And inside CBS headquarters, the mood wasn't just tense, it was siege-like. Stephen Colbert arrived 2 hours earlier than usual, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, and wearing a look that told his staff exactly how the day would go. He walked into the morning production meeting without saying a word. No greeting, no smile, just a stack of printed tweets under one arm and a look of quiet fury. Rob Jensen, the executive producer, was already pacing when Colbert entered. "She's not backing down," Rob said. "She's tweeting again. Just posted a picture of the studio exit with the caption, 'You can kick me off stage, but you can't shut me up.'" Stephen tossed the stack of tweets on the table. The top one read, "Breaking, Karoline Leavitt, to release internal documents showing political manipulation inside the Colbert show. The curtain is coming down." "Where the hell is she getting this stuff?" Stephen asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, stripped of showmanship. "We don't know," Rob said. "But the fact that she says she has it is already doing damage. Online sentiment's shifting. She's positioning herself as this underdog truth-teller who took on the liberal elite and lived to tell the story." "She's not telling a story," Stephen snapped. "She's writing fiction and selling it like fact, and we're just standing here watching it catch fire." Another staffer spoke up cautiously. "Do we want to release the full, unedited interview ourselves? Maybe take control of the narrative?" Stephen turned on him. "You think releasing that train wreck helps us? You think it makes me look better to have the world see me losing my temper on air while she calmly dismantles every angle I had prepped?" Silence. Stephen exhaled, ran a hand through his hair, and sat down slowly. "What about legal? Can we hit her with defamation if she releases anything?" Rob hesitated. "Only if the documents are fake. If there's any truth in them—" Stephen didn't let him finish. He stood back up. "I want names. I want to know who's leaking anything. If someone in this building gave her internal communications, I want them out before noon." But it was already too late. At 10:47 a.m., Karoline Leavitt went live on her own feed. No press conference, no podium. Just her, seated in front of a plain backdrop, speaking directly into the camera. "Last night I sat across from Stephen Colbert, expecting a disagreement," she began. "What I encountered was an orchestrated attempt to belittle, smear, and ultimately silence my voice. But what they didn't expect was that I came prepared, not just with confidence, but with evidence." She held up a thin folder, labeled Internal Segment Memos. "The Colbert Show. I'm not here to ruin reputations. I'm here to reveal patterns." And with that, she opened the folder and began reading. In this internal document dated July 12, 2023, producers outline a planned segment titled, quote, "Shaping the Narrative, recommending the use of comedy to undermine credibility of key conservative figures in the lead-up to midterm elections." The memo goes on to cite benefits such as increased sponsor engagement from a major progressive lobbying group in exchange for branded segment placement. She flipped the page. Here's another, dated October 4th. A segment on climate change, specifically tailored to coincide with an ad buy from an eco-conscious investment firm, whose top executives also sit on the board of a super PAC that endorsed the same Democratic Senate candidates repeatedly praised on air during that week's episodes. The live stream shattered expectations. Within minutes, the view count surged past 3 million. And worse for Colbert, every word of it sounded plausible. The tone, the structure, the paper trail. Back at CBS, Stephen was pacing now, fists clenched, as clip after clip began cycling through media outlets. "She had no right to those files," he said. "Doesn't matter," Rob replied. "The court of public opinion doesn't." care how she got them. They care that she got them. And right now, it looks like she just exposed the king with no clothes. Then came the final blow. Levitt, still live, spoke directly into the camera. I didn't come on that show to talk about Trump. I came to talk about truth. And the truth is, millions of Americans are tired of being told what to think by people who profit from their division. Stephen Colbert is not a journalist. He is not a comedian. He is a gatekeeper who masks influence behind a desk and a laugh track. And last night, I took the mic back. That quote exploded across the internet. The phrase, "took the mic back," trended within 15 minutes. On Twitter, celebrities began weighing in. Some mocked her, others praised her. Joe Rogan clipped the segment. Elon Musk liked the clip. Candace Owens tweeted, "A star is born." Colbert's team launched a crisis strategy immediately. PR specialists were called in. Lawyers began drafting responses. But internally, something else had begun. A fracture. Some members of his own writing staff began questioning how much longer they could defend the contradictions. Leaks were trickling from multiple ends now. And rumors began to swirl. Colbert had demanded the guest be removed mid-show, but CBS insisted on letting the segment finish to avoid looking like censorship. But that wasn't how it ended. At 5:40 p.m., Colbert re-entered the studio for a hastily rewritten taping of that night's monologue. The room was colder than usual. Applause was less enthusiastic, the laughter forced. He made no mention of the interview, no mention of the controversy. He smiled, delivered the jokes, and retreated behind the curtain. That silence said everything. Levitt, meanwhile, appeared on Fox News an hour later. "I didn't get kicked off that show," she said. "I walked off because I wouldn't play by their script. I showed up with my voice. And when that became inconvenient, they wanted me gone." Then came the moment no one expected. Levitt smiled and leaned forward. "And that was before I released the second batch of documents." The host froze. "You mean there's more?" "There's a lot more," she said. "And I'm just getting started," the audience gasped. And somewhere in New York, Stephen Colbert slammed his dressing room door hard enough to rattle the hinges. The force of it echoed down the hallways of the Ed Sullivan Theater, a sharp punctuation mark on a day where everything had unraveled. His assistant flinched at the sound. A segment producer, who had worked on the show for 6 years, quietly closed his laptop and walked out without saying a word. Even the building, usually a hum of pre-show energy, felt hushed, like a cathedral right after a scandal. Colbert stood, in front of the mirror, breathing hard, his shirt wrinkled, hair slightly disheveled from tugging at it during the commercial breaks. This wasn't just bad optics. This was collapse. The headlines hadn't slowed all day. Leavitt exposes. Colbert shows political deals. Karoline Leavitt's takedown, a turning point in media accountability. Colbert under fire, truth, satire, or propaganda. It wasn't just conservative voices amplifying it anymore. Center-left columnists were beginning to question the ethics of late-night commentary. One headline on a respected media watchdog site read, "When comedy stops being funny, how Colbert became the message." Stevens' phone buzzed again. A text from an executive at CBS simply read, "We need to talk. Board is meeting Friday. Come prepared." The phrase stung worse than any headline. In Washington, D.C., the story was now being used as a political battering ram. House Republicans were demanding a congressional inquiry into the undisclosed coordination between entertainment platforms and political advocacy groups. And Levitt? She wasn't hiding from the heat. She was walking directly into it, boots on and voice steady. Her second document release was timed with precision. At 7 p.m., she published another set of internal communications, this time linking Colbert's senior writers to political consultants during key election cycles. The messages showed late-night jokes being reviewed in advance by third party policy advisors to ensure strategic consistency with public messaging. The emails were real, the dates matched, and the consultants were very real names tied to super PACs with multi-million-dollar spending records. Colbert's team issued a legal threat. Levitt's attorneys countered with a prepared press conference and an open challenge. "We welcome litigation. Discovery will be fascinating." The network's hands were tied. By the following morning, Colbert's approval ratings, usually tracked internally through nightly analytics and audience sentiment tools, had dropped by double digits. Calls for transparency flooded the CBS public inbox. Longtime viewers felt betrayed. Younger viewers felt deceived. The term manufactured dissent began circulating alongside his name. Stephen Colbert, once seen as a cultural compass for liberal America, was now being viewed as something else entirely, a man whose power had gone unchecked. But Karoline Leavitt wasn't celebrating. She stood quietly in a hotel room in Manhattan, the city lights behind her glowing orange in the dusk. Her team had gathered around a small screen playing back her Fox News interview. They were excited, giddy even, but Karoline wasn't smiling. "This isn't about winning a feud," she said. "This is about showing people that platforms matter, that narrative control matters. He made a career out of laughing at us. I just made people realize that the joke was on them." The room went quiet. She looked out the window. "Now we take it further. This isn't about me or Colbert anymore. This is about every voice that's been told to sit down, shut up, and clap on cue." The next day, the Colbert team attempted damage control. Stephen opened his monologue with a strained attempt at humor. "Welcome to the Colbert Show, where apparently I'm the villain now," he said. The audience laughed. Somewhat. A few clapped. But something was off. He pushed through his monologue, each joke landing a little softer than the one before. When he reached the chair, he paused, looked at the camera, and for the first time in over a decade, he dropped the character completely. "I've spent my life trying to make sense of the world through comedy. But somewhere along the way, maybe I started speaking too much and listening too little," he said. "To my staff, my viewers, whether you agree with me or not, I hear you, and I know I need to do better." It was as close to an apology as he could manage. Some applauded it. Others dismissed it as damage control. But for Stephen Colbert, it was the first sign of humility the public had seen in years. The following week, the network announced a temporary hiatus for The Late Show. Officially, it was for creative realignment. Unofficially, it was time for cleanup. Karoline Leavitt, meanwhile, had emerged from the chaos not as a pundit, not just a press secretary, but as a new kind of conservative icon. She wasn't just talking to her base anymore. She was being invited into independent podcasts, centrist panels, and high-profile interviews where hosts usually wouldn't touch Trump world figures with a 10-foot pole. Her message was resonating. You don't have to agree with me to recognize the hypocrisy in who's allowed to speak and who gets shut down. By the end of the month, she launched a national initiative focused on media transparency, an ambitious effort aimed at pulling back the curtain on the entertainment news industrial complex. She called it Mic Check. The tagline was simple: because influence deserves accountability. And just like that, the late-night takedown that began as a volatile argument on a comedy stage had morphed into a full-blown cultural reckoning, one that exposed the cracks in the industry, held a mirror to its loudest voices, and shifted the narrative power back into the hands of someone they had underestimated. Stephen Colbert would eventually return to air, changed, but not gone. His voice quieter, his jokes less certain. The man who once defined the line between satire and sincerity was now forced to reckon with the cost of crossing it. But Karoline Leavitt? She had crossed a different line, and by doing so, she carved out a place in American political discourse not as someone who rode Trump's coattails, but as someone who rewrote the script entirely. not by shouting louder, but by refusing to be laughed off the stage.